G'day folks, Mark here again. Quick update on the firearm situation over here, the regulations. It's the beginning of July, so we're in a place where the transitional period has completed. That's, I suppose in a lot of places, what should be happening from now. If your license is due after this time, then you should be informed by email or contacted by the police department 90 days prior to your license when your license is due, which is where your transitional period happens. And I suppose it's a little more complicated than that, and it's not completely clear on all those bits and pieces. But the other thing that happened last week at this time, I introduced the e-petition that was put forward to actually ask the government to change a fair few of the details of what's going on, basically pushing back against their regulations, asking ultimately for it to be frozen at this moment in various forms. And I put down the link to the e-petition so you can read exactly what Dave, who came up with the e-petition, was putting forward. A good idea to use, and I'll go through and explain that why that is. Part of the reason for the video also is that a few people have contacted me, so what is about this e-petition? Why isn't some of the larger organisations promoting it? And I suppose I'd say I can't tell you why they aren't promoting it. I suppose I've got nothing good to say there. What I would say is it is a good thing to do, and I'll explain that in more details. But it is put forward by a gentleman who is not affiliated with anything, very much trying to find a way to push back against the government, to hold them to account to a fashion, but basically get something logical to happen to help the people. And in that situation, it's really largely about trying to stop things from going forward, stop prosecuting people and things until the review has actually happened. So that's the largest thing he's trying to do in that situation. But it is also another problem for the government to deal with if that turns into a decent thing. Now, they set out, him and the minister set out that brought it forward with a target of 10,000, as to that would make it a big one. That would make it a pretty big one. It's already went to 10,000 in the first 4 days or 5 days, I think it was, so very quickly. In my mind and a lot of people's mind, why not make it the biggest one ever? There are people that say, well, listen, they had the biggest one ever previously, which was about the firearms, the way the firearms regulations were being written and trying to stop what they were doing. They got to 32,000, and they just ignored that. I would say it's a very different set of circumstances. That was about something that was happening. It hadn't actually happened. It was also being railroaded by the police department, all sorts of shenanigans going on with changing things in the Constitution, with essentially lying, telling the Parliament that we don't need to talk about it now because we'll talk about it at the next step. And then when it got to the next step, saying, oh, well, it's an emergency now, so we're going to jam it through. We don't really have time to talk about it. So this is all happening in the same time, and they hadn't gone to some of these steps. So there was a lot of pressure that the Parliament was under by the police department, pushing and basically setting them up to try and get things through, bamboozling them to a certain degree. But also it hadn't happened. Now it has happened. The regulation's in there. The problems are showing up. The Attorney General has said, hey, it's not ready to go. It's not going to be till after it's all done. So there's lots of things that actually say now there is some real problems that the government cannot hide. It cannot be hidden because it is actually happening. There are letters coming into ministers. There's all sorts of stuff all the time. It is starting to be a bit of a furball. So this all of a sudden has a lot better leverage to do something. But there's another side to it. As I went through a couple of videos ago, it's about all the angles. We've got to do all the things. We've got to throw as many spears as we can. So this is another important spear, I should say. The submissions to the review committee, yes, very important. I would have to say that is, you can certainly write in your opinion, you can mention lots of good information that's going to be there already. You've only got 2 days to send it into the review committee. Links are down here below, like the stuff to the e-petition as well. There's only 2 days to get in there, so get it in there. But that stuff is most likely, as mentioned right at the beginning of things, that's most likely to be extended from a 3-month period to a 9-month period. It's and up to 12 months, and it could be 3 months. It's most likely to be extended. It's a monster bill, massive problems, should be a huge amount of submissions. It will get pushed back, and largely that's why the government and even the police department won't have minded that happening, because they'll get most of their job done prior to it even being the review committee even submitting what they suggest to the upper house. Most of the damage will already be done. Doesn't mean it's not valuable, because if we've managed to halt things in the process, then the review committee has a lot more power. One thing, they have all these other issues they've had to deal with of what's been stopped, and the fact that there is things that need to be sorted out, rather than it's all been steamrolled over and then we'll just flatten out those bumps and then just carry on, which is what's most likely to happen if it is 9 months before the upper house get to make a decision. But the other side of things is that with all with these other bits and pieces, then what the review committee is going to have to say will have a lot more power. So the wheeling and dealing, all that sort of stuff is not going to have the traction if they haven't got all the work done in the middle. So all things are very, very important. Submission, super important, but e-petition's important. My suggestion of complaints to the Ombudsman, a path of how to do that down there, like you've got to complain to the police department first. But another important thing, more and more letters in that place, the more problems that we can give the government and the government departments to deal with, then the harder and harder it becomes to ignore them. So do not put all your eggs in one basket, and do understand that this is quite simple in the politics of the, whether it's the gun groups or whatever those politics are, in the people's politics. There's only actually two sides to this conversation. There's the people, and then there's the government. If you're not on the people's side, you're on the government side. So let's be all on the people's side. Let's go for all these things. Be as constructive about doing this. If someone's telling you, oh, it'll mess up this thing here, I would search their motives, because all things need to happen. Otherwise, yes, it will get swept under the rug through the fact of, ultimately, if they've done all the damage in the review particularly, if all the stuff has happened and we've got to where it's 9 months away and people have surrendered their firearms and they're fully complied and they've done all these bits and pieces and ranges have been closed and this has all happened, it's all happened in this process we get to here, then for the upper house to make the decision of, okay, well, we should undo all that, well, that's expensive and really, really hard. So the more likely thing of the wheeling and dealing in that situation is, regardless of how good the reviews are or how good the submissions are, is they'll say, oh, listen, that's just too hard. We'll just keep going forward and we'll just have to, that's spilt milk and we'll just have to go forward. If we've managed to stop a lot of that damage, they have a lot more power. So do all of them, but totally get on to, if your club isn't promoting the e-petition, isn't talking about it, come to the conversation. Time to have the conversation. Wake people up. It's important to be part of it. I believe it's important to be part of the Ombudsman process as well. Be constructive, be polite, be all those things, but it's important. It's about more and more spears thrown at the people who are trying to take the guns away, or in actual fact, it's a lot worse than that. So I suppose then I want to get into, the lot worse than that. I suppose it starts with the concern that a lot of us have right now, and certainly with the ARC group that's coming, it's nearly there. It's taken too long. I fully concede that. They're going through the process to make sure it's not making mistakes of other organisations in times gone by, that it does have its proper constitution, which is done. It does have its proper not-for-profit organisation set up, which is almost done, in the hands of the government right now to get that done. Yeah, the government. Anyway, that's just about there. I hope to be releasing very shortly. But the process of what we have to, the concern is that people who have already either surrendered their firearms, which is really, really sad that people have had to get there, and there's maybe processes to fight that back with the Ombudsman side of things, and maybe with this group to a degree. But the concern is that people have done it and then just given up, gone back to sleep, because it was just too hard. And I understand it. There's some horrible stuff people went through and still went through, and wondering what's going to happen. That is extraordinarily different, and I very much feel sorrow for your situation. But This isn't just about your firearms. Even if you have gone through that process, this is about so much more than that. A lot of things are happening at the same time that people seem to want to have their heads in the sand about, but it's really happening, and I'll go through it in a minute. It's also the same story for the people who've complied. They've fully complied. They've got themselves in line, so they don't need to worry about it anymore, because I've done this and I'll be fine now. I said this 3 years ago. There's people who said it 25 years ago, but said this 3 years ago, particularly on the channel and talking about this sort of stuff, is they're after all of the guns. They're taking the long range ones. It wasn't about the long range ones, it was a group of guns, and it was also a test case to see how people react. And then they've moved, stepped it up, stepped it up, stepped up. Now we got to this, and we'll see how people react. And if they can pull this off, then, listen, the other one, I don't have 5 years in my opinion, because they've tested everything. They've got that. They've got a framework in place. If they pull it off the way they're going, they've got the framework in place, then it's real easy to adjust a little bit and pull them down further and further and further. So if you think you've complied and you're getting away with it, I guarantee you it's not going to be very long. And the other state side of things, that there's people who have woken up and they realise it's coming. There's people who say, no, not here. No, never would in New South Wales. No, never would here. No, we would never would that because we really fight it. I'd say a couple of things to you. One is, there's obviously a statement from our police minister this week saying a couple of other states are talking to him. So sort of proof that, they're interacting with other states. I don't believe that's the proof at all. I believe that's the police minister over here saying, look to the West Australian public, the rest of you, we're doing such a good thing that other states are coming to ask us. They were dealing with the other states 10 years ago. They've been talking together for a long time. There's a far bigger plan in place. And if you think your state is safe because of your situation, tell me what you think happens after one crisis happens in your place. One bad thing happens with guns. And yes, governments are up to that sort of stuff. If you don't know that, check out a video called the WASP files. Go and make sense of that without anything other than other things that were involved than the actual stuff that the public know about. So one instance like that, in any state that thinks they've got themselves covered, you are not, while we don't have all of the players at large or what's actually going on, and that moves into that side of things. What actually goes on? What's actually happening here? There are things that a lot of us don't want to know. We want to think that we still live in the lucky country. We want to think that it's all okay. You talk to some of the stories I get from the farmers' side of things. Now, this isn't about firearms. This is about farmers. This is about farms being bought out by corporations. In some cases, that turns into a mining process. In some cases, that's just a corporation running it and putting the farmer back in as a manager. Good money involved. Some of those stories I've heard into shortly afterwards, no, that stops. There's actually very large properties in Western Australia that have been bought to stop the farming process. You say, that's ridiculous. How could that possibly be? Yes, what I've read a few times now, and actually I think I've seen I can't remember where all the information comes from, but where farms are actually shut down, where they actually remove the livestock and stop the farming. They're actually selling carbon credits for those properties. Don't fully understand how that works, but yeah, the net zero process is happening in places. You read about it all the time. Governments talk about it, but it is a transfer of wealth. It's got nothing to do with saving the planet, but it is. And then we move into social credit scores, and we move into the silencing of free speech. And there's so many things that it's happening all the time. We have banks that are controlling how you do business, and insurance companies that are controlling how you do business. That is really happening. We have farmers getting squeezed in horrible ways, really struggling to stay. Some of this stuff happens where these farms are sold because of how hard it is to stay in business. Banks are involved with that, insurance involved with that, the government's involved with that. We really do have limits on where we can go in our country. We know that. If you listen, if you haven't been out there, there really is national parks being chained off. There's beaches getting changed off. There's areas where you can no longer fish. This stuff is really, really happening. It's not a grey area that this stuff is happening. And ignoring it because it's a conspiracy theory and we don't want to talk about it, well, isn't going to make it go away. It is happening. So then when you put down plans that have been in place to disarm the population in one form or another that have really been in play for a long, long time now, and it's accelerating so quickly now, you have to understand that you complying with your firearms isn't going to work for you or for our future. Even surrendering your firearms, and I feel for everyone that's been through that process, but you want to then surrender and think it's all gone away, there's a lot worse to come. If you're only here for another 5 years, it's probably not going to change that much. But if you're going to be here for longer than that, or you care about your offspring and people that are here, well, now's the time when we still have the power to do something. How much that is, I hope for very shortly, we can get. My thoughts are, my desires are, my plan is to create a large people's group. That's what ARC's all about, a large people's group, as big as it possibly can be, full of everybody, to actually have some power in all sorts of fashions. Now that may be where we just simply, there's part of it is about financial power, part of it is about planning power, part of it is about lobbying power, part of it is about helping each other out, working out how to help people with the problems you've got. Part of it has to be about public, not disorder, but public rallies and that side of things. If we can get a large group where, okay, we've got a fight on over here where the four-wheel drivers are getting hammered over this, and they've decided to do a rally because they've had enough, or the truckers, or the farmers, or the firearms owners, or the fishers, or whatever, but there's a rally that's for this cause, and we can sit down and we can talk to each other and say, okay, we've got this people. So from our different hats, or our inside this group, we want 500 from the farmers, and we want 500 from fishers, and we want 500 from four-wheel drivers, and we want 500 for the firearms owners. So we just get 500 of those people, and each one of those goes over to this rally. So we end up with a 3,000 people rally, simply organised out of where people amongst those groups can do it. We all have busy lives, we all have families, we all have mouths to feed, we all have businesses to run or work for, or whatever it is, FIFO, that sort of stuff. But in that sort of organisation, we can then start to become vocal, and we can start to become noticed. That also moves into public advertising, that also moves into every different fashion we come, but that comes from being a large organised group. We see it in other places around the world. It doesn't need to get to full civil unrest, but it does need to get to where we're large enough and powerful enough. That might turn into where the whole group says, okay, we're having Wednesday off. We can all afford one day without pay. The systems don't like being shut down for a whole day. Very powerful thing. And I'm not saying that is what we should do. This shouldn't be my decisions. But this is the type of thing that a large group can actually do. So please, regardless of your situation, the head in the sand isn't going to work. We have to wake up now. I don't know all of the details that involve with what this is really about. It certainly is a lot bigger plan, and certainly the government are hoping to get this through in a fashion that basically just appeases just enough of the people to get it there where there's not too many sparks come from it. We have to understand that, we have to see that, we have to work out every way to push back against that. So there's a lot more information I've got to share. There's people I want to release shortly, that sort of stuff. Hopefully the group's coming very, very shortly, busting, chomping at the teeth for it. But when I can do that, please be involved. But for you, if you are one of the people that thinks you've got it all lined up, listen, good on you in some fashions, but please don't go back to sleep. Please stay aware that there's a lot more important things to do, and a lot worse things coming if we don't stay awake. Anyway, guys, that's that one for today. Thank you very much for checking in. And yeah, sign the e-petition. It matters, along with everything else. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.